Hello, spacers. Welcome to Starlight, a space opera. I'm Isaac, your host and GM for the adventures ahead. This show, whether you're watching or listening, is a labor of love, and one that we want to make the best for you. So if you can, take a moment to freely subscribe or share however is most comfortable for you. Thanks. Now let's plot a course to Starlight. The Triumvirate was once a combined coalition of the Greys, Elvenkind, and Free Peoples. Bled. Are you listening, son?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Bled, you just had your head down in your arms.
I find I can hear a little bit better that way. You know, there's like too much stimulation just in.
Bled, pay attention or I'll call your mother.
Yes, Mr. Penrose.
You are a tiefling, Bled. You've won the lottery. So many people would give an arm, a leg, anything to have the chance at a prestigious life. Take this opportunity, don't waste it.
Yes, Mr. Penrose.
Now, as I was saying, the Triumvirate was once a combined coalition of the Greys, Elvenkind, and Free Peoples. Greys are an advanced life form that inhabit the desert planet of Umwar. Greys, much like the plants around there, live through photosynthesis. Although that they can biologically eat, it is not necessary. Now, Elvenkind seated themselves on Umar's moon of Hybersil, where they used their advanced understanding of planetary systems to terraform the world. And when the Free Peoples came, escaping the machine menace, they were moved to a neighboring galaxy and seeded onto a world that they dubbed New Toril, where they promptly in their ambition built Vidiciden, the great orbital city. Bled, what is Vidiciden known for?
Well, it's a huge dragon and it...
No, wrong. It is a spaceship. This predates dragons.
Yes. I know, just testing you.
Quaint.
Vidiciden was a spaceship where they were able to build an entire city within the bowels of it. It is entirely rotational and is along the edges of this circular spaceship. It was groundbreaking in that it closely, more than any other starship, mimicked actual planetary life, in that the core ring structure of the spaceship would actually rotate, and at any one time you could look up and see the other side of the city directly above you or below you.
Correct. Good. I'm glad you're listening. Now, moving forward, these Free Peoples all became loosely aligned with the Elvenkind and the Greys, and thus formed the Triumvirate. The Triumvirate that now exists today. It was never meant to be a government, but originally a way of providing aid and protecting interests. Additionally, the Triumvirate employed the Dragoons, a combined armada dedicated to protecting the Intiminus galaxy should there be threat of thinking machines, and of course to explore the boundaries of the galaxy further. For a long time, the peace was grand, and the Dragoons discovered many planets. Of one of those planets was...
Gashendir, a jungle planet, right?
Correct. It teemed with life within these lush, deep rifts within the rocky gorges of the planet. The top of the planet itself was almost similar to that of an uninhabited asteroid or moon. Here, they discovered a reptilian people nicknamed the Dragonborn. The Dragonborn revered ancient deities that were said to be able to swallow planets whole and could one day return and make the universe anew. Now, like any other expedition, this was well before the Triumvirate decided which planets were off bounds to reach out to communicate with. They sent a landing party to communicate with the Dragonborn. Unfortunately, this landing party is all directly the start of the tipping of the domino, which would erase the Dragonborn from the solar system itself as we know it. But, as with all bad things, good can come from evil. Now, it was these two scientists that went down to Geshindir who led the expedition. One was an anthropologist, and quickly they began to interact, learn about this primitive species. Unlike other primitive species, the Dragonborn, however, did not take the landing party as gods or beings of immense power, which they would then include in their pantheon. They saw them exactly for what they were. In their religion, they spoke of this ancient entity, a Dracolith, who could, as they so called it, could travel across space and time itself, one who collected information and brought it back, and when it decided that a world had long passed its life expectancy, it would erase it and begin it anew. The Dracolith, their god as they called it, is long gone and dead. Even to this day, we are not quite sure what a Dracolith is, other than at very best, from the plates and clay tablets we've recovered, a almost winged serpent. Anyways, I ramble. The two scientists began to study the culture, which itself was a direct outflow of the religion, and eventually they convinced the Dragonborn to allow them to see their deity. They followed a shamanistic party deep into one of the far rifts at the equator, and they found that their god, this Dracolith, was embedded within the greatest of craters. And more confusing was that it was infused, the crater, the area, with an inordinate amount of radiation. This rift in the equator shouldn't have had life, yet it was teeming. Animals, plants, all sorts of creatures lived here. Now the scientists, unable to actually enter themselves initially, were confused as to how the Dragonborn could survive the pilgrimage to their dead god on the 2 eclipses per year. And after gathering the necessary equipment, they themselves were able to follow the Dragonborn in on pilgrimage, and what they found took their breath away. They found that the Dragonborn had a minor ability to remain unscathed by the radiation, but that the husk, which turned out to be no more than a pile of bones and goop, also had strange powers. From it almost seemed to create a wall, a protective force field against radiation. And as is the way with all sentient beings' life, they began to think about how this could affect them, how it could prosper them. Tricking the Gadarians, they got them to give them samples of the husk, and they discovered that the cultures of their dead god still lived haplessly. Harnessing the cells, the two scientists realized that it had all sorts of strange qualities. Now Hasdrin, the human, was against taking more, realizing the sacred nature of the husk, and that the need to preserve it for the very sanctity of the culture in which it came from. But Yittel, after conversing with the brightest minds in the dwarven population, realized the potential for the husk. Illegitimately, Yittel disposed Hasdrin as a fraud by deceit, and the dwarf with the help of King Grindel of Clan Johnsteel, set up the means by with which to steal the peaceable Dragonborn's god from beneath their claws. Needless to say, we don't need to go into the details. The Dragonborns fought back, and the dwarves and those of Clan Johnsteel, which would later become the Guild, found law, loophole, and excuse by with which to crush the Dragonborn. Many experiments were tried, and things from living biosuits to DNA integration were created. But of all of those things, there is one creation that stands out the most. They were able to take the husk of these cultures from this Dracolich, their god, and turn it into a living culture that would then attach to the whole of starships and create the very first of the dragons. Alright, class is done. Bled, I'm gonna need that assignment by the end of the week.
Yes, teacher, of course.
Bled, do you want to be part of the serving class your whole life?
No, I just gotta go play with some... See you, teach!
2, 1, go. I suck.
Close enough.
Take it away.
Okay. Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us for this for this Q&A. We're so excited you're joining us for part of this adventure and just getting to know us as players and as characters even more. The first half of this will be available for free for people who are watching, and the second half will be for Patreon subscribers only. This should be I thought it'd be fun to say spacey, and maybe just an enlightening time for some of us. I'm going to go personal. I don't know what the rest of them are asking, but we'll see what happens. And yeah, without further ado,
Wait.
anything to add?
Of course I have something to add.
Oh, what do you want to add?
Per usual, our Patreon subscriber, Mr. James, thanks to your extra contribution, we are no longer on the streets. We are adjacent to the streets in a cardboard box. So thank you.
Ooh.
And if you want to throw more dollars our way, seriously, $1 gets you a ton of extra content. But if not, we hope you enjoy. Atlas does.
But don't worry, we're not asking.
We're definitely asking.
You bastards.
You guys.
Do you mind if I ask the first
Well.
question, guys?
Actually, go for it. I was about to ask
Yeah, sure.
the same thing, but go for it.
All right. I feel like it would be a great place to start in just knowing how Starlight began. So Isaac, this question's for you. Where did the dream of Starlight come to be, and how did this world come into your mind, and why did you want to start a D&D-esque podcast video?
Gosh, so I was probably like most people. I imagine a lot of people didn't start from the beginning, but I was late to the show with watching, the giants of this industry, which is Critical Role. You have like the
Never heard of them.
yeah, a small little podcast. They did a lot better than Critical Fail, and they, they inspired me. Growing up having done a lot of theater growing up, having grown up with Nathan and Sam. Sorry, you weren't cool enough to be a part of this, Courtney, but like we played all sorts of of these sorts of just dumb games, and of one of them was this tabletop RPG game that I thought I was smart enough to make. That was like a really bad parody of The Legend of Zelda.
Okay, hold up.
Oh,
It was awesome. I'm gonna defend it.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
It was
It was the same one I'm thinking about. Yeah, it was the same one I'm thinking about. I remember like bugging Isaac to play it when I was over all the
You
time.
don't give yourself enough credit for that game, my dude.
Well, I still have it. 8 years of work still hidden away in a box, not turned into a book. So, you know.
What's really bad is I almost threw away that box right after we got married, and I was cleaning everything out, and I was like, "What's this? I'm gonna throw it away." And Isaac's like, "No, no, 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 no."
That would have been a divorce.
Yeah, that would have been a divorce. It's
But-
fair.
Yeah. But anyways, like that's the start. That's the inspiration, is having that background, having those backgrounds, and then seeing Critical Role. Like, I had no clue that this was like something that people shared stories in this way. Like audio dramas are super cool, but like they're scripted. You know where it's going. Like being able to do this and tell in like something akin to an audio drama, but have it like no one knows what's going to happen, but then also like have the human element of other people jumping in and changing the story, adding to it. That all really appealed to me, and I think that in some ways, like generally, I'm a pretty level-headed guy. I'm pretty like cool, but I'm also like really kind of cocky and competitive at times. And so when I saw Critical Role, don't worry, there was no part of me that was like, oh, I'm better than a bunch of voice actors. But there's a ton of D&D podcasts out there, and I know
with all the content that's out there, there's still a lot of room for really high quality shows. And when I think about the D&D podcasts and actual play shows and audio dramas, people are drawn to different things. You know, some people are drawn to the show that feels more like you're sitting at a table with a group of friends. Other people are drawn to a more of a mix between an audio drama where it's immersive with some voice acting as well as the game, and then you have those who are drawn to comedy. And so there's niches to deliver in, and with Starlight there is an interesting opportunity, and it's actually this reason I'm about to tell you is the reason why I went the direction of Starlight. But it is a sci-fi space opera, a little Star Wars-esque, a little Dune-esque. There's a lot of stuff coming out from my imagination, and from I try to leave room for the players to create their own stuff for the world. And that element of storytelling in D&D is very underserviced, and I've looked around and I've seen what a lot of people have said, and I love the D&D system. A lot of people do, and there's other great roleplay systems, and a lot of people say like, well, if you want to do sci-fi or cyberpunk, jump on over to XYZ because it just can't be done. And I don't know, I think when you are a professional athlete, you have this like growth mindset, and you're a little bit competitive and fiery, you say, no, why not me? You say, they say it's impossible, I say I can get it done. And that's what I figured, you know? I'm not the only person who loves sci-fi, and we're not the only people who love space operas and D&D, and that was an underserviced area. And so, you know, that's kind of, when you're looking at business or whatever, you seek to fill the void where there is nothing. And there are a few, but not very many. And so, yeah, in many ways, I am a why not me? Why not us? And you put in the hard work, you reap the benefits. And that's short story short. So that's kind of where Starlight comes from. All right, so let's see. I would love to say that we're getting questions in the mailbag yet, but, you know, we are kind of like still collecting those and kind of delving into just questions that we have. And so because of that, I have a question, and I don't really have a cool name. So I'm just going to use my social media handle. For Sam/Clive, at York's Peppermint wants to know, what is your take on this? Clive has found himself caught up in between a rock and a hard place with Makena and Atlas, and desperately needing to get off of the prison colony, and probably not in the manner that he expected. So where, like, because like it's so easy to see where Atlas and Makena fit into things, but how do you envision
where Clive fits in, and especially considering his origins.
So he originally arrived at the prison under another lead that this prisoner knew something about his past, but he doesn't necessarily feel any sort of connection to him other than that, because he doesn't exactly know where he's coming from. Basically, everything that he's running off of is kind of what people are telling him, as he's kind of in this dark area where he kind of has no idea where he's coming from. So the reason he ended up at the prison to talk to Ofax because of another lead, and he doesn't exactly quite know why he has a connection to Ofax until he talks to him and learns that he's part of this deep, dark experiment with these machine beings and possibly humans. So I guess we'll kind of learn how that all connects to each other as we continue on through the story, and as he learns a little bit more about himself and why he's starting to feel all these new feelings and emotions and thoughts, because this is all new to him.
Okay, so then I'm going to hit you with a follow-up question. Now that Clive has had some time, making it onto Rayla's Dragon and the 2-3 days plus hyper travel that it takes to get to Thala Colony, he's had some time to just kind of reflect and rehash on his lot in life. So where does he sit now?
Fortunately, because things have progressed as quickly as they have, he hasn't really had time much to think about it. I would say the first moment that he has really had to really think about all of this is when he actually danced with Makena. That was the first time that he had a moment to just feel these new emotions, these new feelings. Like, why is he wanting to... Because he had a feeling like he wanted to dance, but he didn't exactly know why. Like, why he wanted to express that sort of emotion. And so I would say that was probably the first scene in the story so far where he's actually had a chance to kind of just think about that. But yeah, that's... yeah. Alrighty. This one, I would say the fans are probably wondering about this as well, but Isaac, this is a question for you, Dungeon Master. The name God's Banana, where did that come from?
Oh, I knew that was coming up sometime. Do you want the long story or the short story?
Whatever answer you're willing to give me, because my lovely fiance, who was also a fan of the show, is also curious. This is actually a question coming directly from her.
Right. So that means I'd need to do a good answer and probably give you the long story. So the long story, well, actually, the short story is this is not a comedy-based podcast or audio drama. But that doesn't mean it can't have lighthearted moments, right? And when I was working on the topography of the asteroid of Titan 1, where, the detention facility is, I imagined it being mostly flat with craters. And then I was like, well, I need to have something a little bit different, right? And so what kind of came to mind was like that there was this hill, and it would basically amount to that of a quote-unquote mountain, and I wanted to just immediately God's Banana popped into my head. It was a little irreverent, but but lighthearted, and something that would kind of change the tone a little bit and make everyone kind of scratch their head. And so then I needed to justify it, and pretty much like every other thing that goes into world building, one thing leads to another, which leads to another, and you got to flesh out your world. And so God's Banana, in order to justify that nickname, I needed to get into the mindset of the prisoners. And with that came thinking about the current cycle of the Triumvirate. And right now the Triumvirate's under the Fist, which is kind of an authoritarian, not necessarily bad,
point of leadership. It's obviously chosen by the Federation. But with all of that power and efficiency and ability to, in the term of the order of the gosh, I'm mixing up my names here, but yeah, for basically that charge of the Triumvirate, a lot of powers coalesce and things get done at the expense of sometimes the free people of the Celestial Federation. And so, the Yeth are super powered, things are quick, and a lot of times it's people, the law is there you have to be proven innocent, right? It's not proven guilty under this point of leadership. And so with that comes a lot of collateral damage of people being sent to prison. And so I think that getting into the prisoner's mindset and realizing that during these past 5 years, they are particularly more sullen because you have more people who don't necessarily deserve to be on a prison colony or didn't commit crimes egregious enough to be on there, or are just downright not guilty and got swept up. And then this also goes for people who are in the prison who deserve to be there, that they're going to look out across Titan 1's surface and it's going to all look about the same. And there's going to be this little foothill, and it's going to be the paramount of a full-on mountain for them. And I imagine that there's going to be quite a bit of sarcasm when they look at it, oh, there's God's banana. And just kind of getting into the mindset of someone who is really at their lowest, and in order to get through it, you partially kind of make fun of the things around you. And also it kind of serves as another tool for the prisoners, because they're free to try and escape at any point. But the thing is there's nowhere where they can live outside of in the detention center or in the yard, because it's just so inhospitable of an environment. There is Bilbash Keep, but that's built on mechanical treads and legs, so that this keep of a city where the guildsmen who overlook the detention center, it's walking and constantly staying on the frozen side of the asteroid and rotating in the direction that the asteroid turns. So it's kind of hey, depending on the time of the day, if you can reach God's banana, you might have a chance at sneaking into Bilbash Keep and grabbing a dragon, escaping, And so for the poor souls who do try, it's kind of a landmark to try and reach. But yeah, that's the long story. So I hope I answered that, but that's how usually all the world building goes, is you start with one thing that you want to do, and you have to figure out and justify why it's that way. All right, next question from York's Peppermint. This guy really likes you guys. I don't know, maybe you guys should all go out and follow at York's Peppermint. He has a serious question here. What was your thoughts when Makena revealed the loss of her child, and does this make her the least trustworthy member of the group? Don't all come and jump and answer at once.
I'd say when she first told the group about it, he was kind of, how do I put it? He was surprised in the fact that obviously knowing Makena has been very peaceful and everything, but then also at the same time, when they started getting involved with the cult, and then in the very beginning with some of the talks and reactions with the Sunmaker, there's something obviously not right or not clear in a sense. So then when we finally heard that she involved her kid or her child as a sacrifice, obviously it hasn't been shown very much by Atlas as of right now, obviously, because it just happened. But the fact is that I think it's more he's lost some respect in a sense, because now he's not really thinking that she's mentally sane in a sense, or not. Yeah, sorry, not mentally sane or trustworthy in a way. And then yeah, so it's gonna be a little difficult. Obviously, mostly wants to see how it all plays out with between her and the Sunmaker to see kind of where he needs to, if he can trust her basically later on.
I'll answer for Clive. I think he was less shocked about the fact that she sacrificed her child, and more shocked that she then asked him if he wanted to be her child. Like, Clive doesn't know a whole lot about the whole, family and son and daughter and mom and dad thing. He's kind of all new to that, but something about that just didn't really sit with him very well. If, the first daughter didn't make it, So that's how he felt about that whole situation. Clive is actually still more cautious of Atlas, only because Atlas hasn't really shown anything yet. Yes, what Makena has shown has been kind of traumatic and a little worrisome. At least he kind of knows what to expect from her, whereas Atlas, the only thing that he's seen is him get angry at a couple guards and rage a couple times, and it's kind of terrifying. And if there was anyone that I would be more afraid of getting stabbed in the back by at the moment, it would probably be Atlas, just because he knows less about you than he does McKenna.
Yes, well, I mean, I'd say yes and no. Obviously, everyone knows the Acers business group. That's basically it. But no, he understands that sense. But like when his line of work, what he does, it's like the difference between a cult, I feel like, and like say like a group that's maybe a little doesn't do always the things in the law kind of thing. It's kind of in a sense that the cult seems it's very how do I put it? It's like a different type of being shady in a sense. It's like a cult seems they're trying to deceive all of their own people. Even like the leaders are trying to deceive their own people. But with like a business, it's like, okay, occasionally you have to maybe say something that is 100% true or not. But like, yeah, cult is it's just more severe. It feels like there's even its own people are being like more shady towards each other, or like hiding something from each other and like just using each other in that sense. Alrighty. I mean, it's kind of related. See, this is a problem. This is for Makena. It's not really. I don't think it really has to do too much. But basically, even kind of bouncing off from what we were talking about earlier. But why is Makena trying to be so peaceful, or why is she so against killing now, if she's killed before?
McKenna's trying really hard to turn a new leaf in her life, and I think the reason it's become such a big deal is because it was such a violent past, and so she's trying really hard to turn away from that past and become someone who she's proud to be, and in the past she hasn't necessarily been proud of who she was. I asked Isaac the question about how we started Starlight, so now I'm just curious why you both decided to join Starlight. So whoever wants to go first with that.
I'd say, yeah, so when Isaac, I remember I sat in on a D&D session with Isaac at one point during the whole quarantine time, so it was all online. And then from then, though, we were talking a little bit. Isaac had brought up wanting to do kind of a either like a podcast or like a YouTube or something kind of with D&D. We talked about it for a little bit. I don't think Starlight exactly was decided 100%. I do remember, though, after we talked about it for a day or two, he did bring up a space theme. And I was down for it. I've kind of always been a nerd in some sense. And I really did enjoy sitting in on the other D&D session, so it was kind of something I haven't done in a long time, and I wanted to. A lot of my friends, we play games together online and stuff, and we do this and that, but like I didn't really have a D&D group or anyone that would play or like stick to any of that type of stuff. I might have friends that maybe would be players. Hey. I would have people that could be like players and stuff, but like not like a DM in a sense. There's no one that really fit that kind of criteria. But yeah, when Isaac offered basically to see if I wanted to do the whole Starlight and do everything like that, I was 100% down, and I wanted to get involved with like everything and do the editing or helping out. Sam's doing a lot of stuff on that, and it was cool because it was also reconnecting kind of and keeping in contact with Isaac, which is basically my brother, and then Sam, who I remember when I was younger. So it was real cool. Obviously Courtney, that's the wife of Isaac. I met her at the wedding, but it was just like, it was a way I could actually stay connected with everybody, which was really cool because it's been a long time since I've been able to do that with family and things like that. So yeah, I was down for it.
I was 100% on board the minute that he brought it up. I used to play D&D all the time with my dad. In the day, my dad was dungeon master. He would go through and draw out his dungeons on grid paper and spend hours and hours and hours putting all the monsters and everything into it, and we would play every single weekend. And I got my very first character was a dwarf fighter, and I got him to level 5 before we stopped playing. And so ever since then, I've really been into that whole fantasy scene. I mean, I read a lot of the Forgotten Realms books when they were, big, super big and popular, and got into that whole world. Grizz, the Dark Elf, was my favorite character for the longest time, and still probably is one of the coolest characters. And so I started playing D&D again with my fiance's dad, and then started another group with another group of players. And I've actually brought up the podcasting thing and the live streaming thing to them before, and nobody really seemed to catch on to the idea. But then Isaac had this great idea to kind of take 5th edition D&D and kind of translate it into a sort of adventure that we don't really see a whole lot, like was mentioned before. I mean, there are some space themed adventures, but if you really look into it, about 90-ish% of all of the D&D campaigns that are out there are all based on some sort of fantasy or high fantasy or something like that. And so I just thought going into a space kind of world with the way the D&D works, the rules, the role play, it just kind of opened up basically a can of worms to where we could end up taking the adventure. And that was the part that sold me, because the very first thing I thought was like, how could I make this kind of like D&D Star Wars? And that was my first thought going into it. And so I've been pretty much down with it since the very beginning. All right, I have a pretty good question for you, Atlas. Pretty important part of the story, I feel like, at least in terms of Atlas, and we kind of graced over it and really haven't had a chance to dive into how he really feels. But I think fans want to know, Atlas, when your pilot died, what was going through your head?
I'd say that I think because kind of like when Isaac was like as the captain, or not, sorry, as a pilot, when we landed at the jail, kind of mentioning how many like trips we were on, or assignments we have been on. It was a very rare occurrence to have, for Atlas at least, to have somebody be a part of that many assignments. He liked to go like lone wolf. He didn't like to have a team or have anyone as like a squad or anything, due to some past stuff. But it was just, so he actually built a connection with the pilot, and that it was almost like the first person he could feel connected to since kind of just getting his assignments from the Acers. So but yeah, so he was the first person he could really make like a clear connection with, since like kind of getting his assignments and doing his job. So when losing her, it was a pretty big hit for him because he kind of, in a sense, he's always kind of expected it, just because of their line of work and everything. But also at the same time, yeah, without rambling because I keep rambling. But basically, yeah, it was just that sense of the closest thing he's had to family in a very long time, or like an acquaintance or a friend. So yeah, it was just a big hit to Atlas that he just lost somebody that he spent so much time with.
All right, guys. Cool. We are going to move the remaining part of this conversation over for our Patreon subscribers. Again, thank you for joining us. It is our pleasure to bring this content to you. And yeah, if you are interested in seeing what we got going on over there, just check us out at Starlight Patreon. You can find us, at Starlight Adventures. And of course, you can email us for more information at thestarlightadventures@gmail.com. Again, the rest of the conversation will be over at our Patreon, and for literally $1, you can check out all the bonus content, whether that's story-wise, information if you want to run your own Starlight campaign eventually, or just even just the gifts that we send out quarterly. All right, Spacers, we will see you next Tuesday for more action.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Starlight. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe. For early releases, exclusive RPG content, and other bonus material, check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/starlightadventures. And to reach us for questions to be aired, email us at thestarlightadventures@gmail.com. See you next Tuesday, Spacers.